Hello everyone and welcome to Underwater Adventures with Alex Mirabal. Today we will be talking about wrecks which are difficult to find, and in this particular case a wreck that was practically hiding in plain sight. Nonetheless, it took us a long time to find it and a very difficult operation to find the wreck. So let's dive into it. The wreck we will be talking today is the Santa Teresa de Jesús, sunk in 1622 by a combined fleet of Dutch and English ships. It was called the Fleet of Defense. Why this wreck is interesting? Why are we talking about a wreck that was hidden in plain sight? Because first, let me tell you a little bit the story of how was the battle and how this ship wrecked in front of the island of Mozambique. This was in the province of Nampula, and the Portuguese fleet, which included the Santa Teresa, it was going from Portugal to Goa in India, with the force stop in Ilha de Mozambique, which was like their replenish point in which they have more infrastructure to help fixing the ships and healing the wounded or the deceased, not the deceased, the guy who were ill. The guys who were ill, not the deceased ones, it's very difficult to fix. But the ones that got ill during the trip, the long trip, they were cured in the island and they have some infrastructure there to do that. So at the time, Portugal and England, together with the Netherlands, they were in war. So there was a fleet of this combined two nations of enemies of Portugal that they were waiting in the way of the ships that they were going to go India to attack them and to take either the price of the ship or the treasures they were transporting, which was mainly money in form of silver coins that they were taking to India for trade. So they have this big battle. The defense fleet was waiting for the Portuguese fleet in front of Mochinqual, which is a place in the province of Nampula in front of a river. And in June 1622, this combined fleet attacked the Portuguese fleet. They sunk the San Jose, which was the admiral ship of the fleet. This will be another video because we also found the San Jose. And then they start chasing the Santa Teresa and the rest of the fleet that they were escaping to the island of Mozambique, where they have a big fortress and they could be protected from the enemy attack. So it is very curious, and it will put you a little bit in the mindset of what happened during these battles at that time. The battle lasted like 2 days, and it was a very hard battle. The British and English ships were smaller but better armed than the Portuguese. They were very fast, and they attacked the big Portuguese ships that they were made mainly for trade. Obviously, they were armed to defend themselves, but they were not like warships. And in this battle, they sunk the San Jose, and then the rest of the fleet tried to make it to the island of Mozambique, and they were being chased by the attacking fleet. The story I know, and the story we all know, is because there was a priest on board, the Padre Jerónimo Lobo, who wrote that down precisely. The man was so accurate in his description that allowed us to find the San Jose and then later on the Santa Teresa, which we are talking today. He described nowadays you can see it funny, that after this really vicious battle, when they went between the islands of Goa and Sena, which are two islands that are outside of the island of Mozambique, that they could find themselves almost under the protection of the cannons of the fortress of San Sebastián in the island of Mozambique. The attacking fleet, the Dutch and British ships, they stopped there because they didn't want to get into the range of the cannons of the fortress. So the remaining ships of the Portuguese fleet, they found themselves safe and they started a party on board. They were drinking, and as the priest said, with so many things in the it's not things but things on board, that they first, the San Carlos, ran aground in a shoal that was very well known by all Portuguese sailors, because that was safe haven that they have in the way to India, so they stopped there every year many times. So incredibly, the San Carlos stranded in that shoal, and then finding themselves, I mean, obviously the priest said that they were all totally drunk, and they started firing some little cannons to warn the Santa Teresa, which was behind them, that they should move from the route that they were navigating. But the guys in Santa Teresa obviously were as drunk as them, and they ended up stranded in the same shoal. When the tide went up, the San Carlos managed to refloat and go in the way to the fortress of San Sebastian, and then they managed to strand the ship again, and they sunk there. But the Santa Teresa couldn't go out of that place, so there she stays. Then it comes the very accurate and thorough description of this Padre Jerónimo Lobo, who described the salvage works that the Portuguese did from the fortress to the Santa Teresa, because the Santa Teresa, on top of it, it was transporting the vice king, the viceroy, that was being appointed from Portugal to Goa in India. This gentleman was nonetheless than the great grandson of Vasco da Gama, Francisco da Gama, Conde de Vidigueira, so the Vidigueira Count. So he was such a very important figure in the history of Portugal, that if you are in the area of knowledge that is related to history, well, everyone which is related to Vasco da Gama, it will certainly be a priority in your research. So the Santa Teresa hold that extra value added, historical value added, that the main Francisco da Gama was traveling in that ship. So they actually recorded very well which were the efforts that they made to salvage the things from the ship. The ship was completely salvaged, there was not treasure in it, but you obviously want to locate the resting place of this important vessel. So with this information in hand and the description of this priest, we set to investigate where could she be. Because it was quite accurate what he said. It was this distance from the fortress. We went 3 times a day in different boats to rescue scenes, so you could see this from there. So it gave us a lot of hints that could make the discovery of that ship easy. And this is where the story starts. Because with this information, we thought, okay, finding the Santa Teresa will be a matter of short time. I have in Mozambique one of our closest collaborator. It was a spear fisherman from the island, Machaca, which actually it was a fisherman who helped us a lot. He was a collaborator with us for the many years we were in Mozambique. He knew about some wrecks. He was able to show us around. He was an incredibly accurate person in the moment of saying, okay, I have seen some strange objects in this place, or cannons here, or anchors there. He will always be able to show you the spot with a very high degree of accuracy. So Machaca and I, we were working together every day. We talk about a lot of stuff. And he has mentioned that in the area where we suppose the Santa Teresa would be lost, that in his youth, or many years earlier, he was fishing there for lobster, and he had seen some cannons, and it was exactly or approximately the place that we suppose the Santa Teresa would be. Well, with this kind of information, and the kind of information that we got from the priest, the Padre Jerónimo Lobo, we obviously put together a file and said, okay, we can go and try to find this wreck. It will not take that long. But things in the sea don't happen that way. Machaca has told us that probably in the 90s, I can remember right now, there was a huge hurricane, I think it was called Josephine, and it changed the dynamic of the sediment in the entire area and covered the entire area with sand. a vast amount of sand that would cover every visible evidence. So this was our first hurdle to overcome finding this wreck. So one day I took Machaca with me and asked him, "Hi man, show me where this wreck with the cannons where you were fishing for lobster was." So we went navigating. It's about, probably 1.5 or 1.7 miles from the island of Mozambique, so it's quite far. It's about 2.5 kilometers. And we arrived to a place which was just a clean, white, fine sand, as in the best beach you would have ever seen, but 4 meters deep and in the middle of the sea. It was not in the coast. And he said, "It's somewhere here." I mean, he couldn't get any better because it was actually all covered. So I said, okay, with that and the description of the Padre Jerónimo Lobo, we can find the wreck. So we started, and why I'm saying this? Why I'm saying this is because when you are collaborating with the local community and the fishermen, they are normally very eager to bring up information. They understand how important your research is for their community and for history in general. And sometimes, fishermen, I'm a fisherman myself, fishermen tend to sometimes become a little bit fantasy about stuff, or they don't remember properly, because most of these things happened 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and they would not remember properly, and they will anyway try to take you to the point. So when I saw that place full of sand, I said, okay, the Hurricane Josephine could have bring as much sand as they want, but it could not be this huge area full of sand, and so it looked like it has been there forever.
Pardon to interrupt, but also in the middle of the ocean, no real reference, so
Exactly.
You need to give it some slack.
Exactly, but what it happens to me was that I have never seen that myself.
Yeah.
Which, on me, my ignorance then start playing me tricks, because I said, well, I have never seen this amount of sand to deposit in one place that will totally change the landscape of the area. I thought that was not possible. And I said, okay, maybe Machaca has the wrong spot, or he want to show me, but he can't remember. So I said, okay, I will go through the historical files, which is also a very nice way to do it. And we started, I was in Lisbon, and I started exchanging information with my friend and colleague Faure, which was in Cuba. And through internet, we started changing information about what the Padre Jerónimo Lobo says about the location, and we start shrinking and shrinking and shrinking the area where the wreck could be, and we end up with the small, very small area of about 200 meters diameter around the point. This in the sea is a very accurate area. So we were very happy, me in Lisbon, Faure in Havana, saying, okay, in 3 months when we go back to the expedition, because expeditions are seasonal, when we start the expedition again, we will straight to that point and we will find our wreck. We knew that this area of 200 meters was in the sand that Machaca have said that, okay, it's here, it's somewhere around here. But the sand has 4 kilometers long. We are talking about 200 meters, but this sand patch was 4 kilometers long. It happens what it happened to people with a scientific orientated mind. You arrive to the place with a plan, but when you review your plan, you realize that you have done all this sitting one in Lisbon and the other one in the other end of the world, and we expect to have found the wreck just by reading archival information and playing with the map, and said, no, it cannot be that easy. We cannot do that because that's unprofessional. So we started the magnetometer survey as we have planned from the north of this sand patch all the way to the south. It took us 2 months in scan this area and get close to the point in which we expected to find the wreck, and the wreck was there. We had a huge magnetic anomaly signature in our magnetometer, because in the sand you can see nothing. When we plot in the electronic chart all the magnetic anomaly that the magnetometer was getting from this area, and we dive in the place, it was simply sand. the same sand you could see for 4 kilometers. There was no feature that could tell you that it will give away that there underneath is a wreck or anything. I mean, it was just sand. So we went diving in the place. We select a spot in the middle of the group of anomalies, the anomaly which was more outstanding or the bigger anomaly, and we put a point there, which was a buoy, and we start removing sand to see where we can get. For the first week, we were making a hole in the sand, and we just making a hole in the sand. There was no wreck to be seen. We passed the magnetometer again just in case that we have missed something, but the anomaly was there, so something was underneath the sand. After 3 weeks of removing sand, this is what I'm saying that is hidden in plain sight, because this is in front of the island of Mozambique, where every day we pass up and down. Every time that we go to another wreck and we are exploring this and that, our boats always go over this place, and fishermen go over this place, the weekend divers go over this place, everyone. I mean, it's such an important ship, and it's just so close to the island and so close to civilization that is strange that still hasn't been discovered. But it was under 3 meters of sand. So we started removing this sand, and nothing come up. We didn't see anything that could be part of the wreck. After 3 weeks, we started seeing some things that could be cannons. But the sand, we're making this big hole, and it's like a crater, so the sand is falling down all the time, it's refilling the place. It is very difficult to take the sand as far as it will not come back. Mozambique, in the case that you don't know, but the ones that have been diving in the Indian Ocean and in the side of Mozambique and the Likings, the currents there are very strong because there are big differences of tide. Sometimes you have a 5-meter difference of tide in a day. So all this amount of water has to go into the bay and out to the bay, and it brings a lot of sediment and it's very strong. So whatever sand you put nearby from your hole, it will come back in the next tide and will fill up your hole. We had to elaborate a way of discarding the sand in a place, the exhaust of the water dredge that put it in a place that the sand will not go back so quickly. But the fact was quite painful to get to 3 meters under the sand and start seeing the first elements of the wreck. These were 9 iron cannons that apparently during the salvage works that the Portuguese did at the time, they pile up these cannons in the center of the ship, as we found out later, for being able to access other parts of the ship and take the goods that they were transporting with them and take them to the fortress. So this was a heap of 9 iron cannons, big iron cannons of almost 3 meters each, and probably several hundred kilos of weight each of them, that they were already concreted one to another and making like a big rock in the middle of the sand. So we were cleaning all around, and under the cannons we start finding the first elements of the wood structure of the ship, the part of the wood that was underneath and protected by the cannons. So floor timbers and the elements of the construction of the hull, they were underneath. So we already knew that we have found a ship. Still, it should have been the Santa Teresa, of course, but we just have found a ship that did 1600s. So then I was talking to Machaca and telling him how accurate he was, because he was showing me in the middle of the sand, but still 3 meters under the sand and very close to where he pointed out it was the ship itself. So he was right, and he knew exactly where the ship was, but things actually changed. And I'm telling him that we have found his ship, and he said, yeah, but I remember very well because I used to fish lobsters under the engine of the ship, which is there. And I told him, look, man, this is a 1622 ship. It's a sail ship. It's a wooden ship with sails. It has no engine. It's a very old ship. This is 1622. They had no engines in the ship. This is a wooden ship with sails, pretty much the same as the sail ships you see around today here. He said, yeah, well, look, if it's not the engine of the ship, they were transporting the engine from one place to the other because it is an engine. And said, man, it's 1622, the word engine didn't exist. That was very funny because we started getting together to learn, to exchange the information we have. Why? Because it may seem obvious for people who go to school, that has access to education, that there are some things which you take as granted. This friend of mine, that it was a very accurate fisherman, that he knew things from the sea that I would never dream to know, he didn't have access to education. So for him, engines always existed. Things are pretty much like they are today because he didn't have the chance to learn that in school when the engine was invented or anything similar. And one has to be very careful when talking with the local communities in isolated places at which kind of information you can share and how to do it to make it understandable for everyone. I have another example. I was asking every fisherman in the province to show me if they come across a site with any place with cannons or any ship with cannons. And we got information from them. Okay, we have seen cannons in this reef and cannons in that reef, and that way we found some wrecks. But there was a particular case in which these two fishermen that also collaborate with me for a long time, and they show me wrecks in very difficult access places which were really far from everything. For me, it would have taken me years to go and find the wreck, and they, by their experience, they have told me, okay, there are cannons here and there. They took me one time to a place and they were swear that there were cannons. And we went there. It was very far from land. We went very far in a zodiac. They, typical fishermen, they told me, yeah, it's there. You see, it's there. And there became 45 miles, which you have, since God, I have found with me on board, and he's super cautious with everything, and he took extra fuel and a spare engine for our little Zodiac. So we went the 45 miles and we arrived there, and there was a modern ship sitting on top of the reef. A steel ship, probably a merchant from the 1970s or something, that had an accident and ended up in the reef. There was no way that this ship could have cannons, but they insist that yes, it has cannons. So we arrived to the place. I asked Faure, jump in the water, check if by any chance this ship is stranded on top of an historic ship, that these things happen. We will be talking about that in another video, how ships tend to sink in the same place because they have the same conditions along the years or the centuries. And that was a far-fetched, but it could be a possibility. So Faure jumped in the water. After 2 minutes swimming with the snorkel, he told me, hey man, you really have to rephrase when you talk to fishermen. What do you want? What you are looking for? Because here is full of cannons. They are not the cannons we are looking for, but it's full of cannons. Meaning that the ship was transporting tanks, war tanks. And the ship ended up in the reef, it tilted, and the tanks were under the water, and obviously tanks have cannons. You dive there, you can see the tanks, and all of them have cannons. So the blame is on me, because I was the one who said, I want cannons like that. I mean, I'm looking for cannons. I'm working in history and archaeology. I'm looking for cannons. So for them, they were actually true. They showed me where cannons were.
You asked for cannons and they gave you cannons.
Yeah, I got my cannons.
Very simple.
I got my cannons. So it is just a little disgregation of what we are talking, because working with local communities, you have to be aware that they know from their area much better than you. But there are some things you know that they not necessarily know. So it's up to you to put the information in a way that is actually useful for them and for you. So in this case, we have found the Santa Teresa. We were all super happy. The excavation was very long. As I explained, this situation with the sand, that there was 3 meters of the layer of sand was so deep that the sand was falling in. But after months of excavation and sucking the sand with the water dredge, and we start putting the sand, and we start learning how to play with the currents and put the sand in the right place so it will not come back. The level of the sand start going down, and then we had this beautiful image of the 1622 wreck site with the heap of cannons in the middle. That was not an engine, but was still very important. These 9 cannons and the wood structure of this ship, which has been protected by nature with all this sediment that came on top, and today it's a marvelous wood structure that one can study and find out the construction methods and techniques that they used in the early 17th century, and a wreck that is right in front of the island of Mozambique. I wanted to tell you this story because for many people, when we talk about our expeditions and we talk about the investigation of historic shipwrecks, there is a general feeling that shipwrecks are always in the worst places and in places that they are very difficult to access and nobody has been before. So that's why if you are the first going into this place, you will find the wreck and it will be easy to recognize, okay, sometimes it's like that, sometimes it's not. It has always kept on me as a very peculiar wreck because it was so easy to have been found before, and it took a lot of work, local information, archival information, a lot of tools and weeks and weeks and weeks of removing sand from the place to actually get to the wreck, that we could finally say, write, and declare that we were able to find the Francisco da Gama shipwreck of 1622. I hope you guys liked this video. Please get into the comment section and let me know which aspect or which details you would like to have more information that you would like to know from this interesting activity, which is looking for shipwrecks and excavating and studying the history of these ships. So just keep on diving.